Hello, my name is Dorian Hale, 31 years old, a lawyer living in Delaware. But before I became the man standing before you today, I was a boy living in darkness, where screams and bruises were indelible childhood memories. My story begins in a small town, where red dirt roads led to old houses and where my family from the outside looked like a picture of tranquility. But inside, it was a nightmare. I vividly remember the stench of cheap liquor on my father's breath every time he stumbled through the door. He was a tall, burly man with sinewy hands, always carrying an inexplicable rage. My mother, a gentle woman with sad eyes, often tried to keep the peace, but it was never enough. On nights when my father was drunk, our little house turned into a battlefield. The sound of shattering plates, my mother's cries, and my father's growls blended into a horrifying symphony I couldn't escape. I was only 6 when I first felt the force of my father's fist. It was a winter evening with snow blanketing the road outside. I accidentally spilled a glass of milk on the dinner table, a childish mistake. But for my father, it was an excuse to unleash his anger. "You think this is your house to do whatever you want?" he roared, his eyes bloodshot. Before I could comprehend what was happening, his hand struck my shoulder, so hard I fell to the floor. My mother rushed to me, shielding me with her body. "Please, John, he's just a child," she begged, her voice trembling. But my father didn't stop. He grabbed her hair, pulling her away from me, and the sounds of blows echoed in the cramped kitchen. All I could do was curl up, clutching my head, trying to block out my mother's cries. That night, after my father staggered off to bed, my mother quietly cleaned up the broken shards on the floor. She sat beside me on my bed, gently rubbing the fresh bruises on my shoulder. "Dorian, you have to be strong, okay?" she whispered, her voice choked with emotion. "I'm sorry I couldn't protect you better." I didn't understand why she was apologizing when she was the only light in that dark house. All I could do was hug her, feeling the warmth of her trembling body, and vow to myself that one day I would save her from the monster called my father. The years that followed only grew worse. My father lost his job at the factory, and liquor became his only companion. He drank from morning till night, and every time he was drunk, he found an excuse to take his anger out on my mother and me. Once he threw me against the wall just for making noise while watching TV. Another time, he beat my mother so badly she couldn't stand, all because she dared to ask where he'd been all night. The bruises on my mother's body multiplied, but she always tried to hide them with long-sleeved shirts, even in the summer heat. Strangely, amidst that nightmare, I still found moments of peace with my mother. After every beating, she would take me to the backyard where an old oak tree stood with its thick canopy. We'd sit under it and she'd tell me fairy tales, or we'd simply gaze at the twinkling stars in the sky. "Dorian, do you see? Even when darkness covers everything, the stars are always there," she said softly. "You have to be like that, always shining no matter how hard life gets." Those words etched themselves into my mind, becoming the small flame that kept me standing through the painful days. But I wasn't always strong. Some nights, when my mother's screams echoed from the living room, I hid in the closet clutching a pillow, praying for the nightmare to end. I hated myself for being too small, too weak to protect her. I hated my father for turning our home into a hell. And sometimes I hated the world for abandoning us in that pain. When I was 8, my sister Lily was born. She was the only miracle in those dark years. Lily was a little angel with big round eyes and a radiant smile. She brought a glimmer of hope to both my mother and me. But what surprised me most was how my father treated Lily. With her, he was completely different. He never yelled at her, never raised a hand to her. Instead, he was gentle, even smiling when he held her in his arms. "You're my treasure," he'd say to Lily, his voice full of love. I couldn't understand why he could be so cruel to my mother and me, but so kind to her. And truthfully, I was grateful for it. Lily was the only bright spot in our family, and I didn't want her to endure what my mother and I were going through. However, my father's favoritism toward Lily also made me feel lonelier. Once, when I accidentally dropped one of Lily's toys, my father lunged at me, slapping me so hard my ears rang. "How dare you make your sister cry?" he shouted. Lily wailed, not because of the toy, but because she saw me being hit. She ran to hug me, but my father pulled her away, comforting her as if I were the villain. My mother stood there, helpless, her eyes red. That night, she held both Lily and me close, whispering, "I love you both. No matter what happens, you'll always have me." But I knew deep down, she was breaking too. My childhood years passed in fear and trauma. I learned to avoid my father, to stay silent when he was drunk, and to hide the bruises on my body from my friends at school. I didn't want anyone's pity, didn't want anyone to know my home was a nightmare. But every time I saw my mother with new wounds, my heart ached. I began to dream of a day when I was old enough, strong enough, to take my mother and Lily away from that house, away from my cruel father. When I was 13, things got even worse. My father started drinking more and the beatings grew more brutal. Once he hit my mother so hard she passed out on the floor. I rushed to her, screaming, "Stop, you'll kill her!" But he just looked at me with cold eyes and kicked me aside. I lay there, helpless, watching my mother lie motionless on the floor, my heart shattering. That night, when she came to, she tried to smile at me, but I could see the pain in her eyes. "Dorian, you have to survive for me, for Lily," she said weakly. I nodded, but inside I knew that if I didn't do something, one day I might lose her forever. I started making plans. I would grow up, earn lots of money, and take my mother and Lily away from here. I studied hard, even though every day at school was a battle to hide the wounds on my body and soul. I told myself that knowledge was the only way out of this hell. But deep down, I knew time wasn't on our side. My father was growing more unhinged, and with each passing day, I feared he would one day go too far. When I was 16, an age when I should have been worrying about math tests or a first date with a girl from school, I was instead living in constant fear, always wondering if today would be the day my mother could no longer endure. Our house had become like a ticking time bomb. The arguments between my father and mother grew more frequent, and they often revolved around another woman. I rarely saw my mother stand up to my father, but one time I heard her shout at him, "If you bring her here, I'll kill myself right in front of you." My father immediately yelled back, "You dare threaten me?" "You're nothing, Ellen," he roared, his voice hoarse from liquor. "You think you can hold me back? A useless woman like you?" His venomous words cut like sharp knives into the heart. I began to notice unsettling signs. My mother grew quieter. Her shoulders slumped as if carrying an invisible burden. Once I found her sitting alone in the kitchen, staring at the wall, clutching a cold cup of tea. "Mom, are you okay?" I asked, my voice trembling. She smiled, but the smile didn't reach her eyes. "I'm fine, Dorian, just look after Lily, okay?" she said, turning away as if to hide the pain in her heart. I knew she was trying to protect me, but I couldn't bear watching her destroy herself because of my father. I started secretly documenting what happened in our house. The times my father was drunk, the arguments, the new bruises on my mother's body. I wrote in an old notebook, hiding it under a floorboard in my bedroom. I didn't know why I did it. I just felt that one day those notes might help me do something to save her. But I was still just a 16-year-old kid, powerless against my father's strength and the cruelty of fate. Then the fateful day came on an October afternoon when the sky was gray and a light rain fell. I got home late from school because I'd stayed at the library to finish an essay. When I stepped into the house, I felt an eerie silence. No arguments, no sound from the TV, no Lily playing, no soft singing from my mother in the kitchen. Just my father sitting on the sofa, an empty bottle of liquor rolling on the floor. He looked up at me, his eyes cloudy. "Your mom." "She fell down the stairs," he said flatly, as if reporting the weather. "She's in the hospital." My heart stopped. "Fell down the stairs?" I repeated, my voice shaking. "How did she fall? What did you do to her?" My father shot up, lunging at me, grabbing my collar. "You dare talk to me like that?" I didn't do anything. She fell. Got it? He shoved me to the floor, then turned away, muttering about getting more liquor. I didn't care. I ran out, not even grabbing a jacket, and raced to the hospital a few blocks away. When I arrived, panting, a nurse led me to the emergency room. I saw Lily sitting in the hallway, her eyes swollen and red, clutching the doll my mother had made for her. "Dorian," she sobbed, throwing herself into my arms. "Mom, she won't wake up." I held her tightly, fighting back tears, but inside a storm was raging. The nurse took me to my mother's room, and when I stepped inside, I knew my life would never be the same. My mother lay there on the hospital bed, her face pale, her eyes closed. The bruises on her arms and neck stood out under the fluorescent lights like undeniable accusations. The doctor, a middle-aged man with a somber voice, explained that my mother had suffered a severe head injury from falling down the stairs. "We did everything we could," he said, "but she didn't make it. I'm so sorry." I don't know how long I stood there, only that I held her hand, her skin cold, no longer offering the warmth that had once comforted me. I wanted to scream, to punch the walls, to run home and confront my father. But I couldn't see. Elise couldn't move. I just stood there, frozen, feeling the world crumble around me. Lily clung to me, sobbing, and all I could whisper was, "It'll be okay, Lily. I'll take care of you." But I didn't believe my own words. The days that followed were a prolonged nightmare. My father arranged my mother's funeral, but I knew he wasn't truly grieving. He showed up in an old suit, reeking of alcohol, and said nothing to Lily or me. Neighbors came to offer condolences, whispering about the tragic accident, but I saw the doubt in their eyes. They knew. They knew my father wasn't innocent, but no one dared speak up. I wanted to scream to the world that my mother didn't just fall, that my father was involved, that he had pushed her to her death. But I had no proof. My notebook, filled with fragmented notes, wasn't enough to convict him. I was just a kid, and the law wasn't on the side of kids like me. The night after the funeral, I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, feeling like my heart had been torn apart. I remembered the last time my mother spoke to me just days before. She had hugged me, whispering, "Dorian, you're my hope. No matter what happens, you have to keep going, stay strong." I had nodded, but now that promise felt like a curse. She was gone, and I hadn't saved her. What hurt the most were the doubts I couldn't shake. I remembered the arguments in her final months about my father's affair with a woman named Clara. I heard my mother confront him, her voice trembling but resolute. "John, you think I don't know? You're seeing her again? How long has it been going on?" My father had scoffed, calling her crazy, but I saw the panic in his eyes. Did she know too much? Did he push her down the stairs to silence her? Those questions haunted me, gnawing at my mind every day. I started investigating in my own way. I sneaked into my father's room when he was drunk, searching for any clue. I found an old phone in his desk drawer filled with messages between him and a woman named Clara. They were affectionate but also angry. "Ellen knows she'll ruin everything," one of his texts read. "I'll handle it," another said. My heart pounded as I read those words, but I knew that for a 16-year-old, those texts weren't enough to bring him to justice. I took my story to a teacher at school, Ms. Harris, the only person I trusted. She listened, her eyes full of concern, but then shook her head. "Dorian, you need more solid evidence. These texts, they could be a misunderstanding, and you're too young to confront your father." I knew she was right, but the truth stabbed like a knife. I was powerless, and my mother was gone forever. One evening, about 2 weeks after the funeral, he brought Clara, the woman from the texts, into our home. She walked in as if she owned the place, laughing and talking with my father as if my mother had never existed. I stood in the corner, clenching my fists, feeling my blood boil. "Who is she?" I shouted, unable to hold back. My father looked at me, his eyes cold. "This is Clara. She's going to live here. If you don't like it, you can get out." His words hit me like a slap. I wanted to charge at him, to pound his face until he felt the pain my mother endured, but I knew I couldn't win. Not yet. I looked at Lily standing in the corner, her eyes filled with fear. I knew I had to act, but I also knew time was against me. Our house had become strangely foreign and haunting. It was a place where the cheap perfume of Clara mingled with the stench of my father's liquor, creating a suffocating atmosphere that made me feel like I was choking. Clara was everywhere. In the kitchen where my mother used to cook simple meals for us, on the sofa where my mother once held Lily and me telling us fairy tales. She acted as if she owned the house, ordering Lily to do chores and scolding her when my father wasn't around. I saw the fear in Lily's eyes every time Clara raised her voice, and it tore at my heart. I knew I had to do something, but I was still just a 16-year-old kid with no money, no power, and nowhere to turn. I tried to stay calm, to endure for Lily's sake. Every night I lay beside her, whispering words of comfort, promising that one day we would leave this place. "Dorian, you won't leave me, right?" Lily asked, her voice trembling. I held her tightly, feeling her small body shake in my arms. "Never, Lily, I promise." But that promise weighed heavily, like a debt I didn't know how to pay. Everything came to a head one Saturday night, about a month after my mother's funeral. I had been working a part-time job at a nearby grocery store to save money, hoping to gather enough to take Lily somewhere, anywhere, away from my father and Clara. When I got home, it was dark, and I found Clara yelling at Lily in the living room. "You're as clumsy as your mother," she shouted, just because Lily had spilled a glass of water. Lily stood there cowering, tears streaming down her cheeks. I couldn't take it anymore. My blood boiled, and I stormed into the room shouting, "Leave my sister alone!" Clara turned to me, her eyes icy. "Oh, the brave little boy, huh? Who do you think you are, talking to me like that?" She stepped toward me, raising her hand to slap me, but I grabbed her wrist. "Don't touch me or my sister," I growled, trying to stay calm despite my pounding heart. My father came home at that moment, a bottle of liquor in hand, his eyes bloodshot. "What the hell is going on?" he roared. Clara ran to him, pointing at me, her eyes gleaming with cunning. "Your son dared to disrespect me. He thinks he's the boss of this house." My father glared at me, his eyes blazing with anger. "You dared touch Clara?" he bellowed, advancing toward me. I stood my ground, though my legs trembled. "I didn't touch her. I was protecting my sister. She has no right to yell at Lily." That was the final straw. My father lunged at me, grabbing my collar and dragging me to the front door. "You want to play the hero? You want to defy me? Fine," he yelled, his breath reeking of alcohol. He flung open the door and shoved me onto the steps. "This isn't your home anymore. Get out." The door slammed shut behind me, the sound of the lock clicking like a death sentence. I sat there on the cold steps, rain beginning to drizzle. I had nothing, no money, no food, no water. Just a backpack with my grocery store uniform. I stared at the closed door, hearing Lily's cries from inside, and my heart shattered. I wanted to pound on the door, to barge in and take Lily away right then and there, but I knew I couldn't. My father was big, violent, and I had no chance against him in a physical fight. All I could do was stand up, wipe my tears, and tell myself I'd come back for Lily. I wandered the streets, not knowing where to go. That night was freezing, and I found a secluded corner in a park to take shelter. I sat huddled, clutching my backpack, trying not to let fear consume me. I thought of my mother, of the time she held me under the oak tree, telling me to be strong. "Mom, what do I do now?" I whispered into the darkness, but only the wind answered. The next morning, I went to the house of Tommy, my best friend from school. I stood at his door, hesitant, but I had no other choice. When Tommy opened the door and saw me, clothes soaked, eyes red, he pulled me inside without a word. Tommy's mother, Linda, was a kind woman. She gave me a hot breakfast and sat me down to talk. I told her everything about my mother, my father, Clara, and how I'd been kicked out. Linda hugged me, and I, a 16-year-old boy, cried like a child in her arms. Linda let me stay for a few days, but I knew I couldn't stay forever. I didn't want to be a burden, and I worried my father might come looking for trouble. I thought of my Aunt Sarah, my mother's younger sister, who lived in a city a few hours away. Sarah and my mother had been close, but after my mother married my father, Sarah distanced herself, unable to stand his behavior. She and her husband had attended my mother's funeral, and Sarah had cried a lot but also offered me encouragement. I decided to call her. "Dorian?" Sarah's voice came through the phone, filled with surprise and worry. I told her everything, my voice choking. "Aunt Sarah, I don't know where to go. Lily's still there with Dad and that woman. I need help." She didn't hesitate. "Come here right now, I'll take you in. We'll figure out how to save Lily." Her words were like a light in the darkness, and for the first time in days I felt hope. Linda took me to the bus station, pressing some money and a bag of food into my hands. "Dorian, you're a strong boy," she said, her eyes misty. "Take care of yourself and don't give up on your sister." I nodded, hugged her one last time, and boarded the bus. As it pulled away from the town, I looked out the window, feeling like I was leaving a part of myself behind. But I knew I had to go. For Lily, for my mother, and for myself. The journey to Sarah's wasn't long, but to me it felt endless. I sat on the bus, clutching my backpack, thinking about everything that had happened. I wondered if I could go back and save Lily. I wondered if my father would hurt her the way he did my mother. Those thoughts drove me crazy, but I told myself to stay calm. Sarah would help me. We'd find a way. When I arrived, Sarah was waiting at the bus station, her eyes red but her smile warm. She hugged me tightly, and I felt the warmth I'd lost since my mother's death. "Dorian, you've been through so much," she said, her voice trembling. "From now on, I'll take care of you." She took me to her home, a small but cozy apartment in the suburbs. Her husband, Robert, was a tall man, a former football player with a gentle heart. He patted my shoulder and said, "Welcome to the family, kid." Those first days at Sarah's, I was like a ghost. I ate, slept, and went to school, but my mind was always on Lily. I called Tommy, asking him to keep an eye on her. He reported that Lily was still going to school, but she seemed sad and quieter. I knew I had to act fast, but I needed time to stabilize. Sarah and Robert helped me immensely. Sarah enrolled me in a new school, bought me clothes and books. Robert taught me some basic self-defense moves, saying, "A man needs to know how to protect the ones he loves." I nodded, but I knew physical strength alone wasn't enough. I needed something stronger: knowledge, a plan, and time. I started rebuilding my life, but every night I dreamed of my mother. In my dreams, she stood under the oak tree, smiling at me. "Dorian, you have to save Lily," she said. I woke up drenched in sweat and told myself I wouldn't fail. I would go back and I would get Lily out of that hell. Living with Aunt Sarah and Uncle Robert was a significant change. Their small apartment, with its cream-colored walls and the scent of freshly baked cookies, offered a sense of safety I hadn't felt since my mother passed away. But every time I closed my eyes, the image of Lily, her big, fearful eyes cowering before Clara, haunted me. A constant reminder that I couldn't rest. Not yet. I knew I had to act, but I couldn't just rush in like a reckless kid. My father was a big, violent man, and Clara, though a woman, was no less cruel. I needed a plan, and I needed help. I confided in Aunt Sarah, telling her everything. From my father's beatings, my mother's mysterious death, to how Clara treated Lily. Sarah sat silently, her hands clenched, her eyes red. "Dorian, I'm so sorry," she said, her voice choked. "I didn't know things were this bad. I should have taken you kids away sooner." I shook my head. "It's not your fault, but now I need your help. I have to get Lily out of there." Sarah nodded. "We'll do it, but we need to be careful. Your father, he's not someone to take lightly." She turned to Uncle Robert, who was sitting on the sofa, listening to our conversation. He stood up, placing a hand on my shoulder. "Dorian, I'll go with you. No one gets to hurt your sister." Robert, with his towering frame and past as a football player, gave me a sense of reassurance. I knew with him I had a chance. The drive back to my hometown took 3 hours, but to me it felt like a lifetime. I sat in the back seat clutching my backpack, trying to stay calm. Robert drove, his eyes focused, while Sarah held my hand, whispering, "It'll be okay, Dorian. We'll bring Lily home." But I couldn't stop the worry gnawing at me. When we reached the town, it was nearly noon. Our old, dilapidated house loomed under the weak sunlight, looking even more run down. The windows were caked with dust, the front yard overgrown with weeds. I took a deep breath, trying to suppress my fear. "I'll go in first," I said. "You and Uncle Robert follow, but wait for my signal." Robert shook his head. "No, we go together. It's safer." I wanted to argue, but his resolute look silenced me. We stepped onto the porch, my heart pounding like it would burst. I knocked on the door, trying to keep my voice steady. "Lily, it's me." No answer. I knocked harder, and then the door swung open. Clara stood there, her eyes venomous. "What do you want?" she snapped, hands on her hips. I didn't respond, just pushed past her and stepped inside. "Lily," I called, my voice echoing through the house. "Dorian?" Lily's faint voice came from the bedroom. I ran to it, flung open the door, and saw my sister sitting on the bed, clutching her doll, her left cheek red from a slap. Her eyes lit up when she saw me, but then she burst into tears. I thought you left me." I knelt down, hugging her tightly. "Never, Lily. I'm here now." But the moment was cut short by Clara's shriek. "What are you doing in my house?" I turned to see Clara at the door, my father staggering out from the living room, a bottle of liquor in hand. "You bastard," he growled, advancing toward me. "You dare come back here?" Before I could react, Uncle Robert stepped in, his massive frame filling the doorway. "John, calm down," he said, his voice low but menacing. "We're here to take Lily. Don't make this worse." My father sneered, but I saw a flicker of fear in his eyes. "Take her? This is my house. I'm her father." Aunt Sarah stepped forward, her voice icy. "John, you beat Ellen, my sister. And now you let your mistress abuse Lily, my niece. You don't deserve to be a father." Clara interrupted, shouting, "You're lying. I didn't do anything to that kid." But Lily, still in my arms, sobbed. "She hit me. She hit me when Dad wasn't looking." That was all I needed. I stood, pulling Lily behind me. "We're leaving," I said, staring into my father's eyes. "And if you try to stop us, Uncle Robert won't go easy on you." My father stepped back, his gaze wavering between anger and fear. Robert took a step forward, and I saw my father falter. Clara screamed something, but Sarah grabbed her arm, pulling her outside. "Shut up, Clara. You have no right to be here." We left the house, Lily clinging to my hand, her doll dangling in the other. My father stood at the door, not following. Maybe he knew he couldn't win. As we got into the car, Lily hugged me, sobbing. I was scared. "I thought you wouldn't come back." I kissed her hair, tears streaming down my cheeks. "I'm sorry, Lily. I'll never leave you again." On the drive back, Lily fell asleep in my arms, her small face finally at peace. Sarah turned around, smiling at me through the rearview mirror. "You did well, Dorian." But I didn't feel like I did. I had left Lily there too long, and every day she stayed was a day I failed. But now, she was safe, and that was what mattered most. When we got to Sarah's, Lily was bathed and given a hot dinner. She smiled for the first time in months, and I felt a flicker of hope in my heart. But I knew this journey wasn't over. My father, Clara, and the shadows of the past were still out there. I needed to become stronger, not just for myself, but for Lily, for my mother, and for the justice I swore to pursue. The first few days after bringing Lily back, I lived in a strange state, both relieved and restless. Watching Lily play in Aunt Sarah's backyard, softly singing to the doll our mother had made, I knew I had done the right thing. But every time she hugged me, whispering, "Thank you, Dorian," my heart ached. I had left her in that house too long, letting her endure wounds I should have prevented. I vowed that from now on no one would hurt my sister again, To do that, I needed something stronger than fists or courage. I needed knowledge. I needed the law. The idea of studying law came to me naturally, as if it had always been there, waiting for me to recognize it. My mother had lived her entire life in silence, enduring my father's abuse because she had no way out. She had no money, no protector, no one to stand up for her. I didn't want anyone else to suffer like she did. I wanted to become the person my mother needed when she was alive, someone who could use the law to protect the vulnerable, those trapped in toxic relationships like my family. I shared my intentions with Aunt Sarah one evening as we sat at the kitchen table sipping hot tea. "Aunt Sarah, I want to study law," I said, my voice slightly trembling. "I want to become a lawyer to help people like Mom, like Lily." She looked at me, her eyes shining with pride. "Dorian, it's a tough path, but I believe you can do it. You have your mother's heart, strong and never giving up." She took my hand, and I felt the support I had lacked throughout my childhood. Uncle Robert, who was reading the newspaper in the living room, looked up. "A lawyer, huh? That's good, kid, but you'll need to study hard. The law isn't a game." He smiled, but I saw the seriousness in his eyes. "I have a friend who's a lawyer downtown. If you want, I can arrange for you to meet him, see what the profession's like." I nodded immediately, my heart pounding with excitement. It was the first step, and I was ready. In the days that followed, I threw myself into my studies with a determination I had never had before. My new school, though not prestigious, had dedicated teachers. Ms. Miller, my literature teacher, noticed the change in me. "Dorian, you're really focused," she said after class one day when I turned in an essay early. "What's inspiring you?" I told her about my dream of becoming a lawyer, though I kept it brief because I was still shy about sharing. She smiled. "You have a clear goal, and that's what matters. If you need help, just let me know." From then on, Ms. Miller became my mentor, introducing me to books about law and helping me improve my writing skills. In my senior year of high school, I earned excellent grades, enough to apply to a university with a pre-law program. Aunt Sarah and Uncle Robert were so proud they threw a small party to celebrate. Lily, now 9 years old, gave me a drawing she had made of me standing under the oak tree holding a book with our mother smiling beside me. "You'll do it, Dorian," she said, her eyes sparkling. I hugged her, tears streaming down my face. "Thank you, Lily. I'll do it for you and Mom." I received a scholarship to a university a few hours from Sarah's house. On the day I left, I hugged Lily tightly, promising to call every day. Sarah slipped some money into my hand, though I knew she wasn't well off. "You're my pride," she said, her eyes red. Robert patted my shoulder. "Keep fighting, kid." I nodded, boarded the bus, carrying my dreams and the pain of my past. At university, I studied like a man possessed. I majored in political science, took law-related courses, and worked part-time at the library to cover expenses. Life wasn't easy. There were nights I stayed up, studying, worrying about Lily, haunted by memories of my mother. But whenever I wanted to give up, I looked at Lily's drawing on my desk. The image of my mother under the oak tree reminded me I couldn't stop. 4 years later, I graduated with honors and was accepted into a prestigious law school. It was the moment I knew I was on the right path. I called Lily, hearing her cheer through the phone. "You're a lawyer now, Dorian." I laughed, though tears rolled down my cheeks. "Not yet, Lily, but I'm almost there." Law school was an entirely different world, a battleground where sharp minds and perseverance were tested daily. I chose to specialize in family and matrimonial law, a field where I knew I could make a difference. I read hundreds of cases about domestic violence, about women and children trapped in toxic relationships. Each story cut into my heart, reminding me of my mother and the years she endured my father's abuse because she had no escape. I vowed to become a protector for those without a voice, to ensure no one else suffered like she did. In my 3rd year of law school, I began working as an intern at a small law firm in Delaware, where I planned to build my career after graduation. The firm specialized in handling marriage and divorce disputes, and I quickly learned how to approach cases with empathy while keeping a clear head. Mr. Peterson, the senior attorney, was an excellent mentor. He saw the fire in me and often assigned me challenging tasks, from legal research to assisting with trial preparations. "You've got potential, Dorian," he said, "but don't let emotions take over. The law isn't always fair, but you can make it fairer." One March morning, as I sat in the office reviewing a case file, the secretary knocked on the door. "Dorian, Mr. Peterson wants to see you. There's a new case and he thinks you should take a look." I nodded, grabbed my notebook, and walked into Peterson's office. He sat behind his desk, his face serious. "Dorian, this is a domestic violence case. Our client is a woman named Clara Thompson. She wants a divorce and an emergency protective order against her husband, who's been abusing her repeatedly." I nodded, jotting down the details, but my heart stopped when Peterson slid the file across the desk. The defendant's name hit me like a punch. John Hale, my father. I felt the blood drain from my face, my hands trembling so much I dropped my pen. Peterson frowned. "You okay, Dorian?" I took a deep breath, trying to keep my voice steady. I'm fine, sir. It's just, I know this man." He looked at me, his eyes sharp. "Know him how? Do you have a conflict of interest?" I hesitated. Part of me wanted to refuse the case immediately, to run from the past weighing on my shoulders. But then I thought of my mother, the years she suffered under my father, her mysterious death. I thought of Clara, once my enemy, now a victim of the same man who destroyed my family. If I refused, who would help her? Who would hold my father accountable? I looked Peterson in the eye. "I know him, but I can handle it. I want to take this case." Peterson nodded, though his eyes remained skeptical. "All right. But if you feel overwhelmed, tell me. This isn't an easy case, and I need you focused." I nodded, took the file, and left his office. Sitting at my desk, I opened the file, each word like a knife reopening old wounds. Clara accused my father of beating her, threatening to kill her if she left. She provided photos of bruises on her body, threatening texts from him, and even a medical report from her worst beating. I looked at those bruises and I saw my mother. I saw the wounds she tried to hide, the nights she cried in the kitchen when she thought I couldn't hear. I decided to meet Clara to understand more. The meeting was arranged at the office with Peterson present to supervise. When Clara walked in, I barely recognized her. The once arrogant, cruel woman from my memories was now gaunt, her eyes hollow with fear. She looked at me, shock flickering in her gaze. "Dorian?" she whispered, her voice trembling. Is it really you?" I nodded, keeping my tone professional. "I'm the legal intern assisting with your case. Tell me everything." Clara sat down, her hands shaking as she clutched a glass of water. She recounted how my father had changed after Lily and I left. He drank more, became more violent. "At first he just yelled at me," she said, staring at the floor. "But then he started hitting me. Every time I tried to leave, he threatened to kill me. I didn't know what to do. I listened, but a storm raged inside me. I remembered Clara yelling at Lily, her sneer when my father kicked me out. But now, seeing her, a terrified woman trapped, I couldn't help but feel empathy. She was a victim, like my mother, like Lily, like me. And though I once hated her, I knew I had to do the right thing. Preparing for the case was a massive challenge. I worked day and night researching domestic violence laws, gathering evidence, and building arguments. My father hired a lawyer, a confident middle-aged man. But I knew he didn't have the upper hand. The evidence against my father was overwhelming. Photos, texts, medical reports, and Clara's testimony. On the day of the trial, I stood in the courtroom, my heart pounding. It wasn't my first time in court as an intern, but it was my first facing my father. When he walked in, I barely recognized him. He was thinner, his hair grayer, but his eyes still held that cold, hateful glare. He looked at me, a smirk flickering on his lips. "You bastard," he muttered, loud enough for me to hear. I clenched my fists, forcing myself to stay calm. I couldn't let him provoke me, not today. The trial began and Clara took the witness stand. She told her story, her voice trembling but resolute. She described the beatings, the fearful nights, the threats. I saw the jury listening, some shaking their heads in horror. But when my father's lawyer cross-examined, he tried to discredit Clara, calling her untrustworthy, and even suggesting she inflicted the injuries herself to frame my father. I wanted to stand and shout at him, but Peterson placed a hand on my shoulder, whispering, "Stay calm, Dorian. We have the evidence." When it was my turn to present part of the argument, I stood facing the jury. I spoke about domestic violence, how it destroys not just the body but the soul of its victims. I presented the evidence, photos, texts, medical reports, and emphasized that my father was a danger not only to Clara but to anyone near him. I didn't mention my mother Lily or myself, but every word carried the weight of my past. When I sat down, Peterson nodded, his eyes filled with pride. My father took the stand, putting on a perfect performance. He cried, claiming he loved Clara, that he never meant to hurt her. "I'm just an ordinary man with mistakes," he said, his voice choked. I gripped my hands under the table, feeling my blood boil. He was lying, and I knew it. But I also knew the jury might be swayed by his crocodile tears. The trial lasted 2 days, each minute a test of my nerves. The night before the verdict, I didn't sleep. I sat in my small apartment, staring at Lily's drawing, whispering to my mother, "Mom, I'm trying. I'm trying to do the right thing." I didn't know if she heard me, but I felt a strange peace, as if she was there, cheering me on. On verdict day, the judge read the decision. My father was convicted of domestic violence, sentenced to 6 months in prison, and ordered to attend a rehabilitation program. Clara was granted a protective order, and her divorce request was approved. As the verdict was read, I saw my father bow his head, but his eyes still burned with hatred when he looked at me. Clara turned to me, tears streaming down her face. "Thank you, Dorian," she said, her voice choked. I nodded, saying nothing. I didn't do this for her. I didn't do this for her. I did it for my mother, for Lily, for everyone who suffered like we did. Leaving the courtroom, I felt a weight lift from my shoulders, but also an indescribable sadness. I had held my father accountable, but I didn't feel victorious. I only saw a man who destroyed his family now facing the consequences. I called Lily, telling her everything. "You did it, Dorian," she said, her voice full of pride. "Mom would be so proud of you." I smiled, though tears rolled down my cheeks. "I hope so, Lily." That autumn, golden leaves blanketed the streets of Delaware. I stood outside the prison gate, hands deep in my coat pockets, my breath forming white clouds in the chilly air. I was here to face my father, partly because I wanted to know how he was faring in prison. I passed through the heavy iron gate. A guard led me to the visitation room, a drab gray space with rows of metal tables and worn plastic chairs. I sat down, staring through the thick glass, waiting. When my father appeared, he was much thinner than at the trial, his hair almost entirely gray, his face etched with deep, haggard lines. His eyes, once cold and terrifying, were now empty, as if life had drained everything from him. He picked up the receiver, looking at me through the glass, silent. "Dorian," he finally said, his voice hoarse. "You here to laugh in my face?" I shook my head, trying to keep my voice steady. "No, Dad, I came because I want to understand. Why did you do those things? To Mom, to me, to Clara?" I didn't expect an honest answer, but I needed to ask, to know if there was any shred of humanity left in him. He gave a lifeless smirk. "You think I'm a monster, don't you? Maybe I am. But life hasn't been easy, Dorian. I tried, but I failed. The booze, it made me lose control." He paused, looking down at his hands, his thin fingers trembling. "I don't expect you to forgive me. I don't deserve it." I looked at him, and for the first time in my life, I felt neither fear nor hatred. I saw only a broken man who had destroyed his own life and dragged his family down with him. "I'm not forgiving you," I said evenly. "Not because I don't want to, but because I can't forget what you did to my mother, to Lily, to me. But I hope you'll find a way to make amends even if it's just for yourself." My father said nothing, just nodded, his gaze distant. I stood, placed the receiver down, and left the room. As I stepped outside, I felt the final weight lift from my shoulders. I didn't need his forgiveness or his admission of guilt. I had faced him not to find answers, but to close a painful chapter of my life. Back at the office, I continued my work, representing women and children seeking escape from violence. Each case was a challenge, but also an opportunity to fulfill my promise to my mother, to protect those without a voice. Reflecting on my journey, I realized life had taught me harsh but invaluable lessons. I learned that strength isn't just in fists or anger, but in perseverance, in rising after every fall. I learned that justice isn't always easily achieved, but it's worth fighting for. And above all, I learned that love, the love of my mother, Lily, Aunt Sarah, and Uncle Robert, was the flame that kept me alive through the darkest days. If I could leave advice for anyone reading this story, it would be, don't let pain define you. Use it as fuel to change, not just for yourself, but for those around you. If you're trapped in darkness, find a spark, no matter how small, and hold on to it. It could be a loved one, a dream, or simply the belief that you deserve a better life. And if you have the chance to help someone, do it. A small act can change an entire life. I don't know what the future holds, but I know I'll keep fighting. For my mother, for Lily, for the people I've never met but who need me. Under the oak tree in my mind, my mother still smiles, and I know she's proud. I won't stop, ever.